All right, so this is page 24 in your course syllabus. Next page is where those literary terms are starting. You can absolutely, obviously, write stuff down onto that page because it is yours. We're going to go over the requirements and all that stuff here in a moment, but just to clarify, and these were dates that I gave you yesterday. The first prompt number 1, you are going, and when I say turn in, I mean like turnitin.com. You're not handing paper copies to me or anything like that. For all this stuff, it's going to get submitted online. This one you're turning in on November the 9th. That is a Friday, all right? And remember, that Friday, you're in school that week on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's that short week where you don't have school on Monday and Tuesday while the little kids have parent-teacher conferences and all that fun stuff. So you have a 4-day weekend, not immediately before it, but kind of leading up to it. That would be an opportunity to try to knock out some independent reading stuff. You know, if you need to get caught up on your book, if you need to work on the journal, get started with it. So you have that opportunity. So on November the 9th is when you're turning in number 1. On November the 16th is when you are going to be turning in journal number 2. For both of these, the expectation is that you are 50% of the way, halfway through your book for both journals. So it's not that for the one on the 9th you're halfway through and then you're done for the 16th. Both of them you are halfway through. I call them journals. They're not you just writing reader response stuff, you know, doing double-sided journals and all that stuff with your diary. It would still be set up like formal essay, meaning MLA format, you know, heading, works cited page, all that stuff. Still follow like the dead word list with to be verbs and things of that nature. But they're journals in the sense that they are not going to be graded as strictly or as formally. So they are not on a 1 to 9 scale. You're not getting a 4+, you're not getting a 6+, you're not getting an 8-. Each journal is just going to be 25 points. And so when you add the two together, that's where you'll get the 50-point total. So your grade would be something along the lines of, you know, you get a 24 out of 25, or you get a 25 out of 25. It's not going to be, you get a 25 out of 25, that's the same thing as a 9. I'm not going into 8 each scale with it. The reason is, I want you to try some stuff that, you know, you might not normally be willing to try on a formal AP essay, where if I mess this up, I could now get like a 4. So the expectation is still there that it's analytical, but, you know, if Zach were like, I don't know if I would want to write about this rhetorical device, I might make a, you know, silly mistake with it, or I just don't completely understand it, this is the opportunity to kind of try that stuff out. The wording of the prompts is going to look fairly familiar, where first one, write an essay which you use specific evidence to defend, challenge, or qualify an assertion made by the text author, directly or indirectly, or characters within the text. So, yeah, does it need unlocked? Probably needs does it need unlocked? Do you have cookies? Well, what's in it for me? So, the first journal is going to be what type of writing assignment?
A DRQ.
It's a DRQ. So you are doing something that you're already kind of familiar with, but it's going to be in a journal response. What are you going to defend, refute, or qualify?
Anything you want.
Not
An assertion made by the text author directly or indirectly, or characters within the text.
So what would be the concern, and I know you haven't read the book yet, or haven't.
I read the whole book.
What could be a concern about defending, qualifying, refuting the author's main argument when you're halfway through the book?
You're only halfway through it.
You may not know yet what the full argument is. For some of the books that you've taken, I think it would be pretty clear after like 5 pages what the argument's going to be. For others, it may not be quite as clear. If you're unsure about the author's argument, I did throw in this, well, you could also write about what characters do in the text. So if you're uncomfortable or you're just unsure, I don't know what Fitzgerald's trying to do, I don't know what Sinclair is trying to do, I don't know what Chopin's trying to do, Orwell, whatever the case may be. Well, I know that character made that decision, that was dumb, I'm going to refute what the character did. Or that was a wise decision made by the character, I'm going to defend what the character has done. So I don't care which one you use. It's not that you're taking a cop out and you're only going to get, you know, a 22 out of 25 if you do a character one. But you can take an author's overall argument, or you can simply do something that a character does within the book. But when you validate the argument, you would want to make sure that you are validating it. So Nina, I'm just saying it because I see the book, Nina wouldn't want to write, this is why Chopin is validating what Edna does as a character, because obviously she's going to probably support what her characters are doing for the most part. So make sure that you're explaining why you're in agreement with what the character does, or the argument that the author's trying to get across. The second one, strategic use of rhetorical techniques, analyze their purpose. We know that this one's going to be a rhetorical analysis. So while we in class are going to be focusing more on synthesis essays and synthesis writing, you're going to be doing 2 journals where you're still getting practice with DRQ, rhetorical analysis stuff. You have a literary term quiz next week, and the week after, and the week after, and the week after. So you're going to be getting more literary devices in your mind, or at least more specific ones than simply going diction, imagery, details, figurative language, syntax. I would think journal number 2 would be one where you could kind of start to try some stuff out a little bit. So if you see a term, like allegory is in the first quiz that we do, you think your story is allegorical at this point, this would be an opportunity to try it out. If it doesn't work, that doesn't mean that you're losing credit. It might just go that I write, hey Alex, good job, but the allegory, but the examples don't quite work, or we need to tighten up the explanation. But he could still get a 25 out of 25 for the response. It's not going to be. It could have worked, but it didn't. Therefore, 5. Now you get an 18 out of 25 or something like that. You're not losing points based on the device or some kind of confusion that took place. Now, if Nina goes, this is syntax, and all her examples are, I don't know, metaphors, like where your explanation isn't matching up at all with what you said you would do, then that could kind of come back and bite you. But if it's a newer device that you're experimenting with and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean the grade's going to come tumbling down.
So are these is it like a 4-paragraph essay? What's the
Yep. So what the requirement is, and we'll read this stuff up here, you have to have at least 2 body paragraphs. So for number 2, with the rhetorical analysis, as long as you have 2 devices, you would be okay. And that way, it's kind of more of a journal because it's not as lengthy developed an essay. First 2 prompts, first half of your independent reading novel. Normally, I don't give you word counts, but for this one I did, where the minimum is, I guess we lost smartboard capabilities again, probably. The minimum is you have at least 500 words. The equivalent of 500 words would be like a page and 2/3, a page and 3/4, not counting works cited page, heading, all that kind of stuff. So you would need to turn in something that's more like at least probably 530 words or something along those lines. So in that way, it's going to be multi format, works cited page. So far as quotes, you need 4 examples coming from the book, 2 of which would be direct quotations. That's not per paragraph, that's in total. So you do the 2 body paragraphs, you have 2 examples in each paragraph, you would be absolutely fine with that. I bet it wants an, how about that? So you have the 500 words, you have at least 4 cited examples. Of those 4 examples, at least 2 are going to be direct quotes. You'd be fine. All right? The way in which people most commonly miss points. They forget a works cited page. To be verbs all over the place. You're still losing, points for those. Or their quotes, their examples don't signify half of the book. So if you're reading 1984 and you should be up to like page 122, and all your quotes are from like page 13 to 50, that's going to be a concern where I'm not saying you didn't read half the book, but you're not demonstrating evidence from half the book. So make sure you do spread that evidence around. That could be something where, you don't have school for those first 2 days of the week on the 5th and the 6th. Do you want to show it to me on Wednesday? Is this enough evidence? If these are my page numbers, will that be okay? I can give you the thumbs up or the thumbs down ahead of time.
If we read more than 50%,
That's fine. Yep, then someone else asks that, say, do I have to stop? No, you can keep going. I mean, you could be 50% for the first journal, but maybe for the second one, you do end up being 2/3 of the way through. And you'll get the first journal back before you would be submitting the next one. Like before, at the latest, I would want to get it to you on Wednesday, and you'll have through Friday night to always turn those things in. So you should have at least 48 hours to I did something stupid. I forgot to italicize the title or something like that. So I don't want to lose those silly points.
For the second one, will we have to be done for them?
No. So for both journals, 1 and 2, the stuff that's due on the 9th and the 16th, you're still halfway through. But you're right about
Just have to read halfway up when we turn it.
So I mean, you don't have to limit your argument to the first half, but
Yeah.
but don't get well. You know what? I read 2 chapters, so I think I can defend, refute, qualify something. No, I want you to at least be more than halfway through. For the whole book, that's where these last 4 essay assignments come from. The important thing to understand is you are going to choose one. You're not going to write all 4. So 3, 4, 5, 6, you're going to pick one. We'll talk about these in more detail as we get closer to it, but your due date for this one is going to be November the 27th. That's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So before you guys go away for your Thanksgiving break, we'll come back, revisit the prompts. I think to do it right now when you haven't read any of the book would be a complete waste of time. But after you're at least halfway through the book, 2/3, maybe done with the book at this point. When we talk about the prompts, then you can start to go, okay, I think that one would work best for my book. I went with these prompts because I feel that any of them could be used for any of the independent reading books, but usually 1 or 2 will kind of separate themselves in your eyes, and you'll go, that's the one that I want to write about. But for us to go over that right now would be a waste of time. When you do that essay, that one will be a formal AP 1 through 9, same setup as like what we did for the Grapes of Wrath type of writing assignment. So in total, you got 100 points of essay grades that would be going in with the 2 journals combined being 50 points, and then this one essay being 50 points. Literary term quizzes, independent reading journals, that's probably your best opportunity if you're trying to bump up a grade, a couple percentage points. This would be a way that you might be able to do that, because 24, 25 out of 25 on journals goes nice in the essay column, and those literary term quizzes tend to solidify what's going on in the quiz column.
Are we doing anything with like rough drafts of your editing with that essay?
No, that one you're just going to submit.
Yeah.
And then when you select, and I know I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but when you select your next independent reading book that we do in December, you're only going to write one of those final essays. So we're not going to do journals for the second one. You're just going to read the book, write an essay, and be done with it. Okay. So the main thing to focus on for now is going to be the journals, DRQ, rhetorical analysis. Just understand they're going to be, a little bit shorter essays compared to other stuff that we've been doing. You're not going to be turning in 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 word writing assignments for these. Intro, conclusion will probably be scaled back a little bit. Body paragraphs, and the minimum would be the 2. You could write 3 if you wanted, but the 2 body paragraphs would be where you would be putting more of your attention. Any questions?
So for when we're doing the second book, will our one essay be 100 points or is it 70?
It'll still be 50 points because your take-home essays, while they always, all your essays always show up as 100, but your take-home essays, unless I tell you otherwise, they'll be 50 points. Like your Grapes of Wrath, your both independent reading, the synthesis essay that we're going to end up doing, they'll all be equal. And you don't. You don't know what your next book is going to be anyway. Let's say you do prompt number 3 for The Awakening. When you do your next independent reading book, you could still potentially do that prompt. So you don't have to start, well, wait a minute, I need to plan ahead so I can say prompt number 3 for Gatsby or whatever. You won't have to worry about that.
What's the logo?
Concord University. Anything else for independent reading before I switch gears?
Starting in.
Okay.
Will you edit it?
Edit what?
Like newspaper from our place?
Yes.
What are you calling it?
The sickle and hammer.
Nice looking beard.
It's pretty nice. It's better. You like this better than a Thoreau beard? Yeah. Anyone know who this is? Specifically?
Looks like Ben Affleck.
Context, you can see we're talking civil rights movement. Now, this isn't contemporary Martin Luther King Jr. by dress, you know, a little bit earlier than what King would be. I don't expect that anyone would go, oh, that is, and then name the person. But I'm thinking a fair number of you know the name anyway. At least last name, not necessarily first name.
C.C.J. Carpenter.
Not Harry Potter. That's always the first guess.
Oh.
It's what Grant.
He's not on
It's an H.
What is that? It's like Homer Simpson.
Homer P. Simpson.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, I've heard Blessed.
Still isn't great.
I've heard Blessed. I don't know.
Zach, you said, oh, okay. Like,
Yeah.
do you know?
There was like a court case.
It's a court case.
Oh, plus even the Ferguson.
There you go. See, you said I still don't know, and now you know.
Oh.
You're so smart. Nina.
Nina, do you remember anything about the case?
It was the Plessy one against.
Who's Ferguson? The guy plus you went against?
It had to do with civil rights.
Ferguson's actually a judge. Plessy versus Ferguson is Supreme Court case. The date for the case is 1896. So this is U.S. Supreme Court. Ferguson is the judge from the local circuit, so the case just kind of starts moving up. So it's not like a murder trial or, you know, offended plaintiff and all those kinds of things. The context, and yeah, you know, civil right case, the big phrase that comes out of Plessy versus Ferguson that gets used in a lot of Supreme Court cases and rationales and is pretty much referenced throughout history is when it comes to segregation, it is legal so long as it is separate, but you're allowed to have separate so long as it is equal. Oops, forgot the word but. Separate but equal. The context for this is Plessy in 1892 gets on a railway car that is for white people only, and he is arrested and put in jail. When we look at the picture, some people go, why was he arrested again? He doesn't look what I would expect a person would look like if he were to be arrested for riding on the white car of a New Orleans railroad. 1890, Louisiana comes up with the Separate Railroad Car Act, which is not saying it's legal, but it is forcing railroad companies to have separate cars. You're going to have cars for whites, you're going to have cars for blacks. The railway companies actually aren't too happy about this because what do they have to do now? They have to have cars for both whites and blacks, which means they have to add more cars to the train, so more production, more fuel costs, more employees, it costs more money. You still have the same number of passengers riding it. So it's inconvenient for a lot of people, but Louisiana is going, this is what we want to do. Now, this would only be within railway cars that stay in Louisiana. So if you get on a car in Baton Rouge and then you end up going to Savannah, Georgia, that wouldn't fall under this act because that's a car that's going through multiple states and whatnot. So interstate transportation ends up being something a little bit different. And that's one of the reasons why Ferguson, who is the the judge in the case on the local level and the state level, goes, this can be upheld because we're only talking about Louisiana Railway cars with it. Ferguson, Plessy is part of a group that is called the Citizens Committee, and it is basically a civil rights group, a civil rights organization, kind of like a local chapter of the NAACP before the NAACP comes to fruition in 1903, I think. What the Citizens Committee wants to do is they want to challenge this act. So the plan is Plessy is going to get on a car for whites. He's going to make it very clear that he is not supposed to be on that car, and the hope is that he is going to get arrested. Yeah, it is. It's a form of civil disobedience where he's not causing pain or anything like that to anyone. So far as smartboard not working is not civil disobedience, but I was going to say, yeah, technological disobedience, or at very least inconvenience. Plessy's grandfather is a white Frenchman from Haiti. Lives in Haiti, 1790, comes to the U.S. because he comes to Louisiana, settles in New Orleans. He marries what's considered a person of color, a free woman of color. This is Plessy's grandparents. They have children, and then obviously children have children. So Homer Plessy walks around. He is not a person who's going to be facing discrimination in Louisiana really based on minority status, color, anything like that. He would be considered more like Creole, than being African American or whatnot. But he considers himself, and legally he would be considered to be 1/8 black. If you are up to 1/16, then you are not white. So, and can you really prove this kind of stuff?
Without looking into
Well, and even, even if we were to go, well, both of my grandparents were from Sweden or whatever, therefore half of me, well, no, because there's still going to be multiple heritage and cultures that are going to be going into them. Ooh, 000. We don't get that number too often. So he's considered considered a person of color 1/8. Legally, therefore, he's a minority. So for the Citizens Committee, he does not have the same college degree, legal background, philosophical beliefs and things like that as a lot of people on the committee would. But for the committee's standpoint, he's a perfect person for this because he's white enough to be white, but legally he is black enough to be black. So he gets on the car, they are checking in tickets, he announces, oh, by the way, I am 7/8 white, I am 1/8 black, what are you going to do about it? He gets arrested. Which is again all part of
what they did about it was he's illegal.
He gets, and he's not arrested immediately. It's, you need to go to the other car. He refuses to go to the other car, much like, a Rosa Parks type situation. When he refuses then to go to the car for the blacks, then that's when he gets arrested on like $500 bond and things like that. Again, that is the hope. They want him to be arrested so that this can go to court, to trial, at which point they're hoping that they can get this to be desegregated. Does not work on the local level, does not work on the state level. State level won't even hear it, but it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, and that's when you have the separate but equal. It's a vote of, I think it's 8-1, so you have the vast majority of the justices are going, as long as you have equal opportunity in the sense that you're going to have two cars, yes, you might have them segregated, but they're both going to the same place at the same cost, at the same time, at the same speed, that's going to be perfectly fine. The problem becomes inherently when this gets applied to all aspects of life, you have separate, which is going to also result in eventually inequality taking place. But 1896, that's when essentially you have the legalization of Jim Crow laws, legalization of segregation, all of those things that end up being problematic, and certainly something in 1963 that King is having issues with in Birmingham, Alabama. Anyone know what overturns Plessy versus Ferguson. There's another Supreme Court case.
Oh, Brown.
Oh, Board of Education. Yeah. I've heard of this.
Specifically, this is the Topeka, Kansas Board of Education, and this is 1954 is when the ruling comes out. It goes to the Supreme Court in 1953 in the spring. They rehear it in the fall of 53, and then the ruling comes out in 1954. The photo here is
Churchill. Do you know what Winston Churchill looks like?
not like that.
Yeah, not like that.
Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall, from a historical standpoint, is significant with Supreme Court because in 1967, he becomes the first African American to serve on the Supreme Court. He's also the lead attorney for the NAACP, which is filing the case on behalf of parents in Topeka, Kansas. Brown's the first, like alphabetically, the first name of the parents who are filing against the Board of Education. So rather than having parents versus Board of Education, they want to have a name so that you kind of personalize it a little bit. But Marshall is the attorney who later does become a justice for the Supreme Court. When they have this ruling, this is where in 1954 they ruled that by having separate, inherently it is not going to be equal. An important thing to understand about this is this deals only within the realm of education. So when King is dealing with a segregated business district in Birmingham, it's not that they're going against Brown versus the Board of Education, but it's Brown versus the Board of Education doesn't apply to it. School districts, states could have different things in the 1950s, 40s, and 50s as to what they would do. If you were to take the U.S. and you have the Mason-Dixon line, so we're talking basically south of Pennsylvania, most states south of the Mason-Dixon line, the states require that the schools be segregated. You have a lot of states north of the Mason-Dixon line, PA being one of them, where segregation is disallowed. But then you also have states, and Kansas is one of them, where it's up to the districts or the municipalities to decide if they want to segregate. So Kansas does not enforce segregation in schools, nor does it forbid segregation in schools. So this is a perfect area to kind of take a look at, because if you can now get it to be overturned in these states, you have a better chance of getting support for it as opposed to if we're taking a look at Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, states where you really are going to have political issues when it comes to segregation. In Topeka, the high school is integrated, the middle school is integrated, the elementary schools are not. So the parents are parents of elementary school children where they have to, and in their specific situation, for them to get to the segregated schools, so this would be schools only for African American children, they have to walk like 7 blocks to get to the bus stop. And then the bus is going to take you, how many miles to get to the school. On the way to the bus stop, you pass the local neighborhood school that all of the other children would be going to. So there's more of like a pragmatic, logical approach to it as opposed to maybe some other schools that could be selected.
So were like the people that were challenging kids, were they like African?
Yes. So all the people who are challenging, you have 13 parents. I think it's 8 students. The parents of all of them are African Americans who are going to a segregated school that they're not allowed to go to a closer school for them. Now, in a few years, and by no means going, therefore you don't need to worry about it. In a few years, they would be going to an integrated school. So it's a situation where you already have some integration going on. Why not just integrate everything? Supreme Court listens to it. After the spring of 53, it's pretty clear to the justices that they have enough support that they will overturn Plessy versus Ferguson for this, but it won't be a unanimous decision. So they hold off, kind of stall in a way, hear it again in the fall, so in between the two times, they get the rest of the justices to come to their side so that it's a unanimous 9-0 decision. So the fact that this now becomes 9-0 has a much greater effect than, hey, it was a 5-4 split decision. Where politically now, okay, this could now have more of a bias kind of sense to it, but if it's a 9-0 decision, you have a little bit more forcefulness that's going to have to go into the states south of the Mason-Dixon line where it is segregated by law. Now you have a little bit more maybe potential support taking place for it. The problem with Brown versus Board of Education, one, realm of education only, so it's nothing to do with King and Birmingham. Two, and even folks who were happy that it passes, that it overturns Plessy versus Ferguson, don't like the fact that the main reason that gets referenced over and over again is the psychological ill effects that segregation has on children. Which, they're not saying there's not truth to it, but they don't like that they constantly go back to their psychological effects, their psychological data, their psychological proof, as opposed to, morally, we just don't think it's right. So you have some folks who think, well, you should have just simply said, morally, this isn't right. The other thing is there is not a time frame that is given as to when schools have to desegregate. They must desegregate with deliberate speed. Feel free to define what deliberate speed means, because we could each come up with a definition, and it's not going to be the same. So there's not a set by 1957, by 1958, by 1959, you need to be desegregated. Topeka does it fairly quickly. Okay, we just need to integrate our elementary schools. That's not going to be a big deal. Other places, and on Monday we'll talk about Little Rock, Arkansas, they are taking much longer. And if you're in deep South states, I mean, you have mayors, you have governors, where part of their political campaign was, we're here for segregation. We're going to segregate now. We're going to segregate tomorrow. We're going to segregate forever. George Wallace, governor of Alabama, would be such a person. They aren't going to back off just because there was a 9-0 Supreme Court case saying now you need to integrate. And so that is really where you have more of the issues taking place, because you have a lot of political backing for segregation besides, you know, quote unquote moral beliefs that are going on.
Better desegregate with deliberate speed.
So Monday we're going to talk about still something with the Brown versus Board of Education, but we'll also get into the specifics of the protests that are going on in Birmingham that surround King's civil disobedience that he's partaking in. And as I said, we'll pass back to the
Acting of deliberate speed.